Hello and welcome to the video. We have another cheating case. It seems like, well, the chess world seems to be drowning in cheating cases. So I have good news and bad news. Bad news is it's a cheating case, but the good news is it's a very old case. And that's the case of Alexandru Crisan, the fake Grandmaster. Now, probably you haven't heard of this guy, and probably it's good you haven't, because he doesn't really deserve it. So why am I making the video? That's a good question. No. So this guy, well, he was a tournament player. He played chess in the 80s. Reached, I believe, the FIDE Master title. Was rated over 2300. But then something strange happened. And in 1998, Mikhail Krasikov wrote this in the New Chess magazine. So this is a quote, and it starts in the middle of the article. On the other hand, some of the names present in the list just bewilder. First of all, we see a new top player with an amazing 2635 rating, Alexandru Crisan. Now he says amazing. And that's because at this time 2635 was a pretty amazing rating. It brought him up to number 33 in the world. If we compare it to today, if you're rated number 33, you are over 2700. You are a super Grandmaster. So very, very curious. And also because one can hardly find any games of this guy in databases since 1989. His rating on January 1st, 1990 was 2235. And Mr. Krasikov has been looking at his recent results, and these are near 100% scores in some Romanian tournaments one has never heard about. So obviously this raised some red flags, because he reached a rating of 2635, number 33 in the world. And this he did without playing any games of note in the previous 10 years against any of the top 10 players in his own country. He did not participate in the top group of the national championship. He did not challenge for his national championship or play in it. He did not at any point represent his federation in any chess Olympiad. One would think a player rated number 33 in the world would be in the Chess Olympiad, but no. And there are hardly any games accessible in the databases played by Mr. Creason or otherwise published. And it seems like all the results in the tournaments in Romania were from places and tournaments that nobody had ever heard about. So, like he said, in the database, it was hard to find any games of this guy. And for instance, let's have a look here. I pulled out the database here, and as you can see, if we scroll back, he does have some games in the 80s, like I said. There's a tournament in Italy here, Reggio Emilia, Dieren Open, 1989, Dortmund Open, 1989, and some tournament in Amsterdam. So nothing in 1989, from 1989 until 2001. So as you can see, in Amsterdam he's rated 2315 here. In all these games, and he's not doing well. He lost some rating, and he ended up, as we saw, January 1st, 1990, 2235. But then he plays a tournament in 2001. And this is where our story kind of starts. So as it was. So the article was in 1998. People started to take notice, and this was not normal. In July 1997, he was rated 2530. And already on January 1st, 1998, he was ranked number 33 in the world with a rating of 2635. Now, the Romanian Chess Federation brought this matter up, and it was being investigated, and the Romanian Chess Federation was said to be favoring sanctions against Creason at the time. But how did he fight that? Well, he became the president of the Romanian Chess Federation. Problem solved. So the disputes went away. He was rated 2635 and becoming a grandmaster. But fortunately, eventually FIDE intervened, although it was not until 2001. But it was decided that Creason would have to verify his rating by playing in 3 tournaments selected by FIDE, and the first of such tournaments was the Vidmar Memorial in 2001, which we briefly saw. If we look back to the database and we scroll down, let's see, where are we? So this is the Vitmar Memorial. And not surprisingly, our hero, Alexandru Crisan, he scored half a point out of 9. That's all he managed to muster up. And I'm trying to find where I put the... Yep, here's the tournament table. Alexandru Crisan, half a point out of 9. And as you can see, he made only 1 draw. And that draw was against Adrian Mikalcisen, a strong player of course. But Adrian seemed to be in somewhat of a drawing mood in this tournament, and he drew all his games. Fantastic stuff, really. So, what happened in these games at the Vitmar Memorial? Well, mostly he got slaughtered. Let's just put it that way. But we have some games to look at. Well, some snippets at least. And let's start with the game against Georg Moore. We'll pull that one up here. Here we go. Georg Moore with the white pieces and Alexandru Crisan with the black pieces. And this was one of the rare games in the tournament where a grandmaster failed to outplay Alexandru Crisan, and we reached this position where Moore had basically exhausted his winning attempts. He had been trying for a while, but eventually resigned himself to the fact that, okay, he can't win, and he took the pawn. Rook takes e3. But here Creason did not exactly display an understanding of a player rated 2635, and he played rook a5. I think you'd have to search wide and far to find a player incapable of taking on e3 and then just playing any king move. Any king move and your king is in front of the pawn. You can't lose. It should be just basic knowledge. But no, Creason played rook a5, which isn't an immediate draw, but it's still a dead draw. But somehow, again, he was unable to display a very simple understanding of a rook endgame by holding the Philidor position, which he's kind of set up right now. The rook is on the 6th, and you just have to keep the rook there until the pawn is moved forward, and then you bring the rook back and you start checking. This is basic knowledge. But somehow he was not able to hold it, and instead of holding the 6th, he starts checking. Shows no understanding of the Philidor position. Doesn't go to the a6 with the rook. And eventually, although I don't think white's technique was perfect, but the fact that black was completely unable to demonstrate his Philidor position technique He lost this endgame somehow. Some checks and the king comes back. 26-35? I don't think so, Tim. So I didn't really look at more games from this tournament, but it's actually quite funny to look at some of them. He got completely slaughtered in most of them. So he scored half a point out of 9. And that should basically be the end of the story. He was, asked to demonstrate his rating, and he was not able to do that. So one would think that's where the story ends. But that also was not the case. And in fact, if we look at the database, we will see that after this horrible tournament, Vidmar Memorial, right here, where he scored half a point out of 9, all of a sudden he showed up in Kladovo. And in that tournament, he won it by making short draws, probably on demand, and for some, probably an envelope was involved. And then he found some unfortunate veterans from the former Yugoslav republics who were willing and able to throw their games, definitely. So Dusan Rajkovic and Branimir Maksimovic. Then he made draws with Sulipa and Ivanisevic. Rook again was a double round robin. And you can see all these games against Rook, 12 moves, Sulipa 16, Ivanisevic 12, Rook 13, Sulipa 21, and Ivanisevic 17. So some of these might have just been actual draws, given his rating of 26-35. Maybe some of the guys didn't know about him and just agreed to a draw. Maybe some of them got an envelope, who knows. But the other guys, Rajkovic and Maksimovic, they went down, and we might have a look at one of those. And start with the game, Alexandru Crisan against Branimir Maksimovic. Here we go. So Crisan with white, and they played a theoretical line. We'll go quickly over the opening. It was a Nimzo E3 Rubinstein, and everything was fairly standard. And when looking at these games, I found that most of these games were following theory very deep. So either Mr. Crisan at the time was very well equipped in the openings, maybe he had, access to a time machine and chessable, and was very well versed in his openings, or some or most of the games were fabricated, and I think this one definitely was. So pretty standard stuff here: bishop g5, bishop b7, isolate the queen pawn. Crisan with white, and the white is trying to be active here, brings the rook into the game. We have knight d5, very concrete move. We take on d5, queen f5. We grab this pawn here. Black takes on g5 and gets the pawn back eventually here after rook takes e7 and rook takes d4. So we're moved 21. Rook d to e1 is played. And now I quote me and Rogers, who wrote about this case. So far, Creason would have been pleased, managing to follow a 1985 game between Pinter and Olofsson. Yeah, which the players had probably agreed to copy before the game. However, Maksimovic now decides to have a little fun and varies from the older game. And I found this funny because when I saw this, they're following the game Pinter Olofsson, which ended in a draw. And of course, Grandmaster Helgi Olofsson is a very good friend, so I found this quite funny. In the Olofsson game, Helgi took on g2, and knight takes f7 was played. Helgi managed to hold the balance by bringing the bishop back, and white was unable to increase the pressure. And black managed to hold this rook endgame. But Maksimovic didn't take on g2. He played rook g4. Like Roger said, having a little fun. But now, Alexandru Crisan, while not being the 26-35 Grandmaster that he was supposed to be, didn't know the difference, and he copied the game between Pinter and Olsson and played the same move. Knight takes f7. So as Roger said, Maximovist must have been chuckling to himself as Crisan continues copying the 1985 game. But there, knight takes f7 was played after bishop takes d2. Crisan is unable to discern the enormous difference between the two positions. Rook takes b7 was necessary. So Maximovist takes, and again we quote Rogers. But now, however, Maximovich was probably rather nervous, as he is in danger of winning this game if he plays rook takes h2. And that's true. If rook takes b7, rook h1, king e2, rook e8. We can demonstrate that. If we take this, takes the bishop, it's going to be a check, and we win the rook. So black will be up to exchange. So of course it was possible for Maximovich at this stage to blunder a piece and resign, but that would be a little too obvious. Fortunately, Maximovich found the following weak but plausible move, virtually forcing Crisan to find the winning path. So he played rook c2, knight a6 check, and now rook f7 threatening the mate here. And as a bishop c6 blocking the mate, there's rook d1, and now we can't stop the mate. And Crisan won a beautiful game. But of course, like I said, that was not the end of the story. And there was another game which I thought was interesting from the same tournament in Kladovo, where he made all these short draws, and then he won against Rajkovic and Maximovich. So let's see the game against Dusan Rajkovic. So Rajkovic with white, he opened with d4. And again, we played a very theoretical line. It was a Nimzo-Indian, the Leningrad variation, and all these moves have been seen plenty of times before. So we're not going to dwell too much on the opening or the moves, but suffice to say, this had been played before, but now novelty by black. Knight h5. And white proceeds to play knight c1, trying to target this knight on h5. Boomski. But then queen f6, very concrete, because after f4 the knight is hit, but Crisan has this all under control. He takes on f4, Rajkovic takes on h5, and queen takes c3. King d1, and this seems plausible. I mean, if you take here, I'm going to take your bishop, but this is actually close to lost for white after knight e5. Now when you take the bishop, I take on d3, and Crisan was able to sail this home, gave some checks, queen b2, we have to protect the bishop, and now b5, and the king is in trouble, and it's actually mate in a few moves. So that's Dusan Rajkovic, which is important when we come to the next tournament. So clearly a fishy tournament where the draws were kind of given or bought, or people didn't know that he was not 26-35, and then clearly the games he won were, well, at least fishy. So the last games played by Mr. Crisan were in fact in Danube summer, and there he played against more grandmasters from the former Yugoslav republics, Dragoljub Jakimovic and Miroslav Markovic. Won 3 games, drew 1. And let's have a look at the game. Crisan against Dragoljub Jakimovic, which I found interesting. Here we go. Crisan with white, and once again we follow a very theoretical path. Bishop d5. This has all been played before plenty of times. I remember seeing this line in some old Grunfeld theory books. Queen e3 check, king f8, queen f4 threatening mate, bishop f6 blocking, h4 protecting the knight, h6 attacking the knight. We win this pawn, we can't take because of queen takes, and this drops, so bishop takes, But there's a Swiss and Zug protecting this, attacking this. Very, very, very shaky line here. H takes d5, knight c6, the queen retreats. Queen retreats again, knight takes d4, threatening the queen, and the check on c2. But we have this check, and knight e3 covers c2. Queen finally takes the pawn. Black is up a pawn, but white has good compensation and will probably win the pawn back. He pins the knight, he attacks the knight, c5. Now we take on f5. Knight takes f5 and rook d7. So white will eventually win the pawn back because of the poor placement of the black pieces. And that's what happened in the game. g4, knight d4. Now, this is move 24. And do you remember the last game I showed you against Rajkovic? I told you that would be something to take note. Well, this game, up to move 24 by black, knight d4, had followed another game by Rajkovic, where Rajkovic had the white. Is this a coincidence? It could be, but to me it's too much of a coincidence. Rajkovic played rook takes b7, the game ended in a draw. But here Crisan improves and plays e3, which modern computers think is the best move. The knight retreats and okay, black goes for counterplay, h5. And white plays reasonably solidly here and then goes for the rook endgame, where he's up some pawns, and black goes for counterplay, h3, rook c4, king f3, e4, and resigns. So Dragoljub Jakimovic resigned, down 2 pawns, and well, he had been losing, but e4 actually, and the last few moves weren't the best. And okay, it's possible that black flagged, but at this point black is starting to get some really dangerous counterplay, because we're starting to enter with the king, and you start to get really worried because the king is quite quick to come to g1 when there could be some trouble. So finally, when black is starting to get some counterplay, he resigns the game. Very convenient. But at the time maybe they thought it was plausible, who knows. I have one final game from this tournament, and again it's Dragoljub Jakimovic. And well, okay, well, let's just go to the critical position immediately, and I'm going to pull that game up. Let's struggle with white. Here we go. Well, let's go back a few moves. So nothing special going on. Basically an equal position here. But white starts pawn hunting here. Queen takes d6 and queen takes e5. Allowing this move, bishop takes c4. But it seems like here that Jakimovic found a way to throw the game, and he played queen g3. Continuation was bishop takes f1. There was a check. He took an f2. Okay, double attack. But now we get 2 pawns. Rook takes g2 and rook takes h2. And black was able to win this rook endgame. Which is probably very difficult because we keep the king on the back rank and we only push this pawn, which is basically what happened in the game. But going back, for a grandmaster, it should not be too easy to find a way to play here. Granted, it was move 35, but you know, when we take this game together with the other one, I mean, even making luft is fine. h3. If bishop takes f1, you just lose. I give you a check, and you get mated. g6, queen takes f7. So you can't take on f1, so you can make luft. That shouldn't be too difficult. Also, you can try to just attack the bishop. If you take, same variation. And this is a pattern that a player of this strength should be very well aware of. So after rook c1, actually, black doesn't have anything better than rook c2. Rook d1, threatening the check again, and nothing really happens. So yeah, so black can never take on f1 because of the check, so move like rook c1 or h3 shouldn't be too difficult. In this case, it's quite interesting because I wrote about this in 2010. I wrote a blog post, "The Curious Case of Alexandru Crisan," and yeah, this is the. I'm trying to find the. Yeah, here we have ChessBase and the rating graph of Mr. Creason. So as you can see, let's make it slightly bigger. So best elo 2635. So according to this, he reached the 2632 around the millennium. Then he was brought down. The equivalent of his result in the Vidmar Memorial. He was down to 2588, lost about 40 rating points in that tournament, scoring only half point out of 9. So his rating remains there until about, well over 2010, it's brought down to 2132. So this is how long it took FIDE to eliminate this cheating guy's rating. You know, his last game was in 2001, but his rating and title were on FIDE up until then. As you can see, according to this ChessBase stuff, and when I wrote the article in 2010, I looked it up, and he still had the title and the rating, which is crazy. But when you look at the FIDE website, that's a bit crazy. When you look at the FIDE website, which we have right here, here we see his profile, his picture, rated 2132. If we scroll up, FIDE title, fortunately, no FIDE title. His title was revoked. And we scroll down, 2132, 2132. We keep going, no rated games, until we get to 2001, where he played the Vitmar Memorial. But this is incorrect. So it says that his rating was 2635 and then brought down immediately to 2132. But this is simply incorrect, and it seems like FIDE has retroactively fixed this to make it look like, you know, it was changed at the time, but this is just incorrect. He had the rating well into the 2010s. In 2010, when I wrote the article, I saw some stuff, I think in 2015 even, when people were talking about this. So yeah, unfortunately this kind of cheating does exist, where people basically are fabricating tournaments and, you know, corrupt tournament directors and stuff like this, where they fabricate you know, the titles, they fabricate the tournament. And that's one kind of cheating that unfortunately did exist and does exist still to some extent. Hopefully it's on the way out, but it's always difficult to battle against, you know, people from poorer countries, and you know, they have this incentive to just get paid for, you know, fixing things a little bit, and that's very unfortunate. So this was the curious case of Alexandru Crisan, the fake grandmaster. So, you know, leave a thumbs up and likes if you like these kind of videos. We tend to go for quality over quantity here on this channel. But okay, I was playing the Icelandic League, so I didn't really have time to make any videos, but that's not ruin a good story by telling the truth. So that's yeah, the presentation. Hope you enjoyed it. See you in the next video. Bye bye.